Your
The idea was to do green.
I know.
I can barely see the letter.
So that's good because that's the stuff that is not brand new. I'm sorry, I just did green and yellow. They're next to each other in the highlighting box. I'll do gray next time. So I'll take full responsibility.
Just do something I can see.
Gray works.
What page are we on?
We are going to start on, give me 2 seconds.
20.
Are we live?
You've been.
The world is watching me couple. I love it.
Oh,
Good morning, everyone.
Transportation Committee. It is Wednesday, the 16th. It was 9 o'clock, but it's not anymore. And we are here to talk about medical transports and H488.
Yeah. Oh dear. Still have one of my comments in there. I'm sorry about that. So for the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. You are seeing me at my best. So for all of those tuning in on YouTube. So the first change is in section 10 on page 11. You'll notice that I left in the comment add Green Mountain Transit proposed changes. We did. So those are in yellow. So their proposed area of operation would be the urbanized area of Chittenden County as established by the U.S. Census Bureau. And then that Green Mountain Transit may operate service outside the urbanized area with approval from the Agency of Transportation, and nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent other transit providers from offering transit connecting to the urbanized area or providing on-demand services in that area with approval of the agency. So it's written to basically make things broad. Green Mountain Transit felt strongly that they wanted to be clear that they weren't preventing other transit providers from operating there. Because this is a charter, it deals with the rights of Green Mountain Transit and not others. So that's why we provided nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent, because we couldn't say other transit providers may operate because it's not their charter. So that's the weird choice there. But this is the language that they had proposed that I mentioned yesterday. So
Looks good.
okay. Okay, the next change in here. Skip past all of the hard to read green highlighted things. And the next change is on lines 13 and 14 of page 21. This is in the intent section around the mileage-based user fee or MBUF. So these were changes we had discussed yesterday, highlighted in yellow. Okay. We're communicating with verbal emojis this morning.
Yes.
I walked into Senate Appropriations and there's a chart on the wall, and if you're late you get the emoji with a frowny face on it.
Oh god.
And I have more frowny faces than most people, so
It's very bad.
I'm just saying.
Well, I'm glad you don't keep one here, because I think 3 out of 4 days every week I have a friendly face for being late. So I get a lot of emails from Megan saying, "Are you on your way yet?" So anyway, here we've changed from work towards collecting a fee on kilowatt hours to examine collecting a fee on electricity that is dispensed. So I looked into the kilowatt hour singular versus kilowatt hours. They're used interchangeably, but my brain just could not work with kilowatt hours singularly. So I changed it to electricity, if that's okay with the committee. But we can change it back to kilowatt hours singularly.
And people will know what that is.
Yeah.
People know what electricity is,
Yeah.
but they don't know what KW is.
I think they do. But this also would allow for that fee to not be on a per kilowatt hour basis, but you could also look at a flat surcharge or something like that. So there are. I think that to the extent this is being looked at, it's being looked at in a flexible way anyway, but this reflects sort of flexibility on how you could put surcharges on that electricity. Okay, the next change is down on page 25. And this was just a slight change in the language. The mileage-based user fee will be an interim step towards gradually expanding the mileage-based user fee to all motor vehicles. We took out the date that it would be implemented on to allow more flexibility.
Okay.
And all of this language, the other language around it is still highlighted in green just because I don't have on my notes that we closed out these sections yet. So then we get to the medical transports language, and there are several sections here. So the first is section 23 on page 29. So this is proposed language. So the proposal from the Public Transport Association that I worked on with AOT is for $600,000 to be appropriated from the general fund to AOT in FY26 for the purpose of providing grants to hire volunteer coordinators. And then the volunteer coordinators would be responsible for the identification, recruitment, and retention of volunteers to provide transportation services to individuals enrolled in the state's demand response transportation programs. Subsection B would require the agency, to the extent possible, to provide grants to public transit providers in a manner that is geographically balanced and ensures the distribution of volunteer coordinators throughout the state. And then subsection C requires a report back from the agency in consultation with the providers regarding the extent to which the grants actually resulted in an increase in volunteer drivers. So the hope is that you'll see a strong increase in volunteer drivers as a result of this money, but this will also provide you with the opportunity to see if perhaps the recruitment effort is not as effective at improving the performance in that area. Any questions?
Do you want questions as we go along? Or,
Yeah, I don't know if this money will stay in there, but that's for the.
Yes, that's up for appropriation. It is the one request that this committee is making of the appropriations committee.
It's nice.
I'm hoping we have the support of the chair.
We'll talk about it.
well, we might pack the room. Can I just, on this?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, definitely. We just need to have that little exchange.
Okay, acknowledge. So there were multiple things that were suggested. I thought the DMV checkoff was a really good idea, and I don't think it would be that expensive. So I would support that also. I don't know if that needs to be in the bill.
It should be, if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think it was suggested. I don't have it in this draft because I didn't have language. I think we had discussed the possibility of having the commissioner come in to talk about the possibility of integrating that.
Yes.
And then looking at how communication would work. So that can definitely be added. In the rush to get this drafted yesterday, I did not put in a placeholder for that, but it's easy to add a second.
Okay. And
So-
so I think that's important. And I think at least give AOT the flexibility to use the funds to increase the payment to the volunteers themselves, because right now all they get is mileage. And I think I've thought for a long time that they should actually be paid more or something. And that could end up being more effective than the volunteer coordinators. So I would like to give, if AOT doesn't mind, I would like to give them the flexibility to use the funds for the volunteer coordinators or the increased payment to the
Volunteers.
volunteers. Yeah, I mean, I think that would make a big difference. But obviously, Jim
I
Moulton
see a
is here.
hand from
Yeah,
Jim, and
yeah.
if the committee doesn't mind me,
Of
but
course, no, I want.
Jim, would you?
Thank you, Senator Westman. So a couple of quick things. One change before I get to your comments, Senator Harrison. In the very last line of subsection C, it talks about resulting in an increase in volunteer drivers. And upon hearing it spoken out loud, I recognized that it would probably be better to use volunteer capacity. We have this mixture of, you could have one full-time volunteer at 40 hours a week. You could have 3 volunteers doing 10 hours a week. You've actually increased the capacity for the system more by having the one 40-hour person. So the simple measurement of number of volunteers alone would not accurately reflect necessarily the increased capacity in the system. The second is we certainly would support a checkoff box on the DMV forms. So that is something that had come up, and we would support that as another way to create volunteer opportunities and volunteer awareness for people. In terms of utilizing the money here for greater compensation for volunteers, if we do more than mileage reimbursement, then we get into, or if we, number one, if we make the mileage reimbursement greater than the federal rate, then we get into taxable income, which starts to cross the boundary into whether they're employees or not, potentially employees. And in particular, if we do provide volunteers around the state with incentives, they could be gas cards, they could be other things. There is a limit of $600 where if that were exceeded, we would be in the position of having to create 1099 forms and taxable income. So there are real limits on what we can provide for the volunteers themselves. That being said, that you have heard, at least from time to time, Ross McDonald talk about the community driver program, which is basically in between our traditional CDL drivers for fixed route service and the volunteers. It would be a different type of job where people wouldn't be required to have CDLs, but they would still get some kind of compensation. I wouldn't be opposed to referencing in here something to, community drivers without necessarily defining explicitly what that means. I think it's still, being worked out. Caleb Grant, I know when he spoke last week, also talked about the ultimate desire for support of community driver vehicles, not buses, but sedans and the like, where community drivers would have access to capital that was in our respective fleets. So I think as far as this language goes, there could be a reference to not just recruiting and retaining volunteers, but also potentially community drivers.
Thank you for that, Jim.
You're welcome.
You can take your hand down now. Let's run through the rest of this and then we'll get the agency up here. And we will want to address if there is a checkoff or something in that. Go ahead.
All right. So the next is section 24. This is language that is a repeat from 2 prior big bills that it appeared in. And this is providing that in the coming fiscal year, prior to executing a contract to provide Medicaid non-emergency transportation services, DEVA shall provide the Joint Fiscal Committee detailed analysis demonstrating that by executing the contract, no state policy, including coordinated delivery of transportation services in the older adults and persons with disabilities program and the Medicaid non-emergency transportation program will be compromised. There will be no degradation of service to eligible individuals. And the financial stability of the state's public transportation systems will be maintained. The analysis shall also include the impact of the Agency of Transportation's investments in vehicles, technology, and other capital investments on the coordinated service delivery model. So this is language that I think originally came from Senator Kitchell back in 2018, I want to say.
Yep.
And then was repeated again when the contracts were last out for bid in fiscal year 21. And then will be repeated again for the coming fiscal year. So it's essentially just a report back on the process and how the contract is going to be set up.
Since we're on the verge of negotiating new contracts between with DEVA and the public transit agencies, could we put something instruction about that this ought to be in part of the contract negotiation?
I'm not sure I follow what you're looking for.
Their contract is up 26.
Yeah, it's up.
So within this this fiscal year that's coming up, they will be negotiating. DEVA will be part of the negotiations in the new contract. How do I make sure that they, as part of their negotiation, have a discussion with the providers about background checks?
I see. So that the background checks are in section 25. So I would say there's two ways we can approach it. We can add language to, we could actually approach it in both section 24 and section 25. So section 24 is a report back. And what we could do is just say subsection C, as part of the report back, the department shall provide an update to the committee on steps it has taken to streamline the background check requirements for drivers providing transportation services as part of the program. And in section 25, what we could say is we could move subsection B down to subsection C. So that's a report back, and just put in a new subsection B that the department, as part of negotiating a new contract to provide volunteer transportation services, shall to the extent possible negotiate for terms that would streamline, or to the extent possible, or to the extent permitted by federal law, shall negotiate terms in the contract that will allow for the streamlining of the background check process for volunteer drivers. We can't require whoever they're contracting with to.
Oh, and I
agree to
understand
terms,
that they are up against some federal requirements, but it should they should know that we're understanding that 8 background checks is a hindrance to working through the process to get volunteer drivers.
Yeah. So I think I can massage the language there, but we can add in a requirement that they to the extent permitted by federal law, negotiate in good faith for terms in the contract that will facilitate
If you could
the
bring
reduction.
something back for the
Yeah.
committee to look at.
I will do that. So, that really brings us into section 25 there, which just to summarize, subsection A provides that on or before January 1 of next year, AOT and the Department of Vermont Health Access shall, to the extent permitted under federal law, amend policies and requirements related to background checks for volunteers providing transportation services to individuals enrolled in the state's demand response transportation programs, to permit a volunteer who in the past 3 years has passed a background check required by another state agency or department to be eligible to provide transportation services through the Older Adults and Persons with Disabilities Program and the Medical Non-Emergency or Medicaid Non-Emergency Transportation Program. And I want to note there, the 3 years is an arbitrary date range that I chose. So that is, that's definitely up for amendment based on testimony. I just picked a range that seemed reasonable in my head without any knowledge of the requirements that they're dealing with. And then 2, create a variance process for individuals applying to volunteer to provide services through those programs to permit a waiver of incidents showing up on a background check that occurred at least 10 years prior to the application date, provided that the granting of a waiver would not compromise the safety of passengers. I think I can make that flow a little more smoothly. But basically what that is saying is look at whether there are certain incidents that would show up on a background check that could be waived without compromising safety, understanding that there may be certain incidents that you simply cannot waive because you cannot guarantee the safety of passengers. So I think there could be things like the abuse of a vulnerable adult would be something you probably could not waive under any circumstance, but perhaps another minor violation that shows up on a background check that's not related to something like abuse or something like that, where you're like, that's a
Like
huge red
fraud or
flag.
something.
Right.
Like it.
So minor fraud or something like that would show up, where you could potentially say the individual's been rehabilitated. They've got a period of time without any other blemishes on their record. This could be waived. And also understanding that there may be federal requirements that say you can't waive any of these.
Yeah.
So just, and I think I have that language up at the very top that says, to the extent permitted by federal law, to give them the
You
opt-out.
got a CNN when you were 25 and you're now 45. If that's,
Right.
I've known some crazy kids in my day.
People make mistakes, people change.
Yep.
And this is designed to allow them to see if there are things that they can waive without losing federal authorization, that sort of thing. That said, there may be suggested changes to this language since they haven't had a chance to look at it. All right. The last section is, or the last subsection there is just asking them to report back with a summary of any actions they've taken and identifying any provisions of Vermont statute that require modification. I could not find in a brief search provisions in statute that limit this, but that said, there are limitations when I do a word search, and I will fully acknowledge that I very likely may have missed some provisions in our law that may need an update.
Jim has his hand up again, and then we're gonna switch to the agency. And we'll talk about some of the other issues that have been raised.
Okay.
Jim,
Thank you, Senator Westman. A couple of quick comments. Number one is under, I believe it's 25A1 and 2. It talks specifically about the NEMT and OND programs. I think adding a reference to other dial-a-ride programs would be relevant, not just exclusive to those two. There are smaller programs that are less talked about. Recovery Jobs Access is one. We've had return to work programs. So I just wouldn't want it to be limited in that way.
I will do that.
Thank you. The second comment is in reference to the 3 years. I'm trying to think a little bit about this in the sense that if someone has passed, let's say, a Dale background check within the last 3 years, we would still do annual background checks on people. We do them for everybody annually because you never know what's happened within the past 12 months. And I will say I've had specific examples of somebody who would have passed background checks for several years in a row. Something happens and it comes up anew. So it may still be that the 3-year benchmark is something as a look back, well, they passed Dale 3 years ago, we can certainly consider them, but it wouldn't preemptively say they've automatically passed all their background checks because we really want to know on an annual basis if something new has happened. So I don't quite know how to change the wording or reference it, but that's the concept that I'm getting at.
Okay.
And then to the reference of 10 years, I am curious actually what an agency like Dale uses as its litmus test for going back. I absolutely agree with Senator Westman and others that, you know, there are plenty of people who have erred in their youth, who have turned their lives around and, you know, are valuable members of the community. We don't want to keep them from adding to our volunteer or even paid workforces. We use internally, for example, 10 years for DUIs. So it's not a bad number from my personal reference, but I'm just curious what Dale or an agency similar to that would be in terms, especially of working with vulnerable populations. The DUI is very relevant to us, obviously, from the driving aspect, but that doesn't reference anything about protection of vulnerable populations, which is obviously a very large segment of the people that we serve.
thanks. At this point, Damon, I'm giving you.
Okay.
You
So
have one more thing you want to add?
I was going to say there are new sections at the end of the draft. There's complete streets language that Senator
You
White
are,
requested.
but we're gonna do this.
Okay.
And then we're gonna come back to
So,
that.
okay.
And you aren't leaving us. are you?
No, I'm not. I'll be in the chair behind you.
Yeah. So
All right.
we're gonna relegate you to the corner.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting us offer testimony on this. Michelle Boomhauer, Vermont Agency of Transportation. First, I would note that all of the matters that Jim Moulton has expressed this morning in terms of modifications to the language are in alignment with our overarching goals at the agency. With regards to Senator Harrison's comment related to maybe there are other ways to expand the use of these financial resources. I would say that one of the underlying sort of premises related to using volunteer drivers is to bring down the per trip cost. And to the extent that we are bringing down the per trip cost by using either volunteer drivers or community drivers, we are then creating more capacity in the system to provide not only these types of rides, but to also make other public transit investments. And so I don't think at this point while we know there's always more need and there could be uses for investments related to public transit provisions in the state. I think focusing on and tackling this particular matter, which, has sort of reached a very significant level since the pandemic. And we've not seen the comeback of the drivers we need to be able to better fiscally balance the system and provide the rides we want to provide. So I think it would be the preference of the agency to continue to focus these resources on recruitment and retention of drivers, because we do have other resources to address, like community driver vehicles, that sort of idea that Kayla brought up, and pay other community drivers.
It was Jim that brought that up.
Well, oh yeah, Caleb talked about it last week. So sorry, yes. So that's just that note on the money. Related to the DMV,
You have.
oh, sorry.
questions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes,
So,
please.
and I had forgotten about the community drivers, because I think having community drivers and volunteer drivers, both of those categories is really helpful,
Yes.
because my issue with volunteers is that, well, I told you,
Yes,
I explained it, but there are a lot of folks who are perfectly happy doing that, and it does work for them, and they understand it, and it's a lot less, administration.
Yes.
So that's great, but it's because the community drivers are a different type of driver. So I just want to make sure that you all have what you need to increase community drivers as well. And I think what I heard is that you don't need new language to add community drivers.
Well, the language referencing community drivers is separate from the money needed to pay community drivers. So I think Jim's suggestion on the language was an appropriate one, but all I'm saying is we have resources within the system to, because every trip we're not like sending a CDL driver with a big van, that sort of thing, is an expense reduction to the capital investments and the cost per trip of the system. So I think I was more getting to, should we expand the uses of this money that is yet to be found to support recruitment of volunteer and community drivers.
Yes, I was just trying to make it so you had some flexibility, so in case some other thing came up relative to this issue, to the medical transport, that you could use the money for that, but it's not a whole heck of a lot of money anyway, so if you're happy with this, that's fine.
This there's a lot of needs, and as Jim pointed out, it helps us to cover a lot of bases across not only non-emergency medical transportation, but job access, addiction recovery, transports, and all those things.
Thanks.
So you are supportive of the language, but I wasn't clear of the $600,000.
So the agency is not asking for the $600,000,
Yeah.
because that's not in the governor's
Sure, yeah.
recommend. However, we understand the VPTA and discussions around why this could be an appropriate investment at this time.
Okay.
But we would not support it coming from the maintenance appropriation.
Right.
Just to be clear.
That's a good caveat.
The last piece I want to touch on was the DMV license renewal checkbox piece. So DMV staff are still examining like how that could potentially work. They have to take under consideration, as I know you've heard in the past, the Privacy Protection Act. And so is there a mechanism where a person, with sort of an explanation, if I check this box, I am providing approval to the DMV to provide my name and contact information to BPTA or whoever for the purposes of learning more about the volunteer driver program, the community driver program. If that sort of mechanism within the license renewal process is like not really feasible from a requirements standpoint, because, we have the modernized system, we have perhaps more ways to have a pop-up box come up when somebody's sort of going into a portal to do a transaction with DMV, such as renew a registration or renew a license or any function they might do. So a pop-up box on the online services. And there also, could be other mechanisms through the website. So I think we can probably find a pathway towards connecting people who are part of the DMV network with our community and volunteer driver programs, but it may not be specifically this. And I don't know how quickly we will have a recommendation from them, but perhaps some language that would just direct us to
I
explore.
was thinking.
Yeah.
Some language that would create a path or start a pathway in, because I think there's real interest in making sure that we give people the opportunity, whether it be when they register their car, when they license renewal, and in this process, there's a number of different points. How can we make sure that that if I went out in the street and said, do you know about this program? Most people would say no. How do we put this in front of people so we get we created an awareness of what's going on.
Yep, that sounds like a good pathway. That's all we had to offer.
So do you wanna, with Damien, take on,
Yeah, I'll let him, maybe Damien could frame it up and then I can sit in to talk about where we are with sections I don't know if there's still sections 19 and 20, the original sections 19 and 20 related in the S75 related to complete streets and the Vermont State Standards updates.
okay,
Did you just, on section 31, did you talk about this? I missed it.
No, he
No,
was.
we're gonna have Damien frame it up and
Yeah,
then
so-
I'll speak to it.
Right.
Sections 28 and 29 of your bill, one of which amends section 31 of the previous bill.
Right.
Okay. So, section 28 is, new language, adding a section that provides, that the agency would provide technical and planning assistance to municipalities to assist with the incorporation of complete streets principles into municipal projects and compliance with the provisions of this chapter, which is the Complete Streets chapter in Title 19. Section 29 amends Act 148 from last year, which was last year's T-bill. And it specifically amends section 31, which was the section regarding replacement of the Vermont State Design Standards. It adds a new subsection C to that section that says that the agency shall ensure that the replacement for the Vermont State Design Standards incorporates provisions addressing the prioritization of reducing vehicle miles traveled in downtown and village centers, alignment of eligible transportation improvements with future land use in downtown and village centers identified by a regional planning commission through the use of transect maps, context-sensitive design standards for downtown and village centers identified by a regional planning commission to ensure that, and we're on page 36 now, standards are compatible with the existing size of the community, intensity of activity within the community, as well as the settlement scale for the community depicted on future land use maps. Investments are directed to the development of a comprehensive pedestrian network consistent with existing and future land use. And design engineering standards provide for ease of understanding and implementation of narrow travel lanes, slow zones for motor vehicle traffic, crosswalks, enhanced shoulders to accommodate travel by bicycles or pedestrians or both, sidewalks, and public transit services. The identification of standards for reducing vehicle travel lane widths and other traffic calming methods that can be incorporated by regional planning commissions into downtown and village centers. Requirements that reconstructed bridges and upsized culverts within downtown and village centers shall incorporate pedestrian facilities. In consideration of guidance from the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation's Vermont Urban and Community Forest Program Green Streets Guide into the design of state highways and downtown and village centers. So that's a lot in there. But those are really 6 broad categories of things that this would require the agency to incorporate into the new state design standards. Do you want me to go on to Dig Safe? Because that's the next section relates to Dig Safe.
I know the agency's gonna wanna comment, so let's take this first
Okay.
and get their comments on that.
This is good. I'm getting in this upstairs. So we go back and forth.
Back to the corner for you.
So, last year in, the 2023 bill, 2023 transportation bill, 8479. Basically, in terms of section, sorry, I don't have the new section numbers, the complete streets section, directed us, to do, I would say, the bulk of the things that are outlined in that section currently. So, we were instructed to prepare and implement internal and external complete streets training. We've completed the internal complete streets training framework, which we used as a pilot to develop how we would deploy the information to our external partners. And because we need to train our staff, but we also need to train municipalities, regional planning commissions, design consultants, a whole variety of folks. So this complete streets training for external parties is set to be deployed this fall, and it'll be delivered through the Vermont Local Roads Program. And we expect that it will be not only sort of a live session for initial rollout. We've been filming those types of trainings, and we also provide modules that people can go online and pick up, 15-minute presentations or segments of training information, recognizing how busy it is. The content of the training will sort of include all the statutory framework and the sort of technical manner in which we have that we addressed complete streets implementation. It'll also include a walk audit, which is basically bringing a professional, and AARP was really the entity which transformed sort of people's ability to be in touch with what complete streets framing and context is by creating this walk audit program nationally. And I'm not, Kelly's going to be on tomorrow, so she can talk a little bit more about the genesis of that, but I almost feel like she may have been involved with some of the work on that for the national. There'll be presentations and then also tabletop activity, which will help folks apply the training, what we've been teaching them. The RPCs will be assisting and supporting these trainings and participating in them as part of their FY26 Transportation Planning Initiative work program, which we engage with them on annually. In terms of the regional planning commissions providing technical assistance, we do that not only on complete streets, but for a variety of transportation topics, some ongoing regular things like, managing culverts, inventories, that sort of thing. And then pop-up things that come along, like a change in a federal sign standard and how we're going to help the towns address those sort of things. So topics, programs, processes are addressed through the Transportation Planning Initiative. I will pause there to see if there are questions related to why we don't support the language that was presented for the streets. We feel we've covered those things, and we also.
Are you talking about both sections or just
No.
a section about the technical?
Just this section about the technical assistance. So it'd be former section 19. Which- 28, thank you.
Well, that's, so 28 and 29, right?
But you just talked about 20.
I
You're
just-
gonna
We
talk
just
about,
talked about 28.
Oh,
we're gonna now hear about 20.
all that was just about 28. I mean, it's gonna overlap.
Yes. So,
I guess the only question about the work that you're doing that we talked about prior to bills, is it ongoing or is it just,
oh yeah,
so it's not just that one time or part of the standards, it's the kind of stuff that you do with the towns and RPCs.
it's an ongoing effort because thinking about sort of the level of staff turnover at the regional planning commissions and at municipalities. The other people that would be involved in this would be, of course, where they were planning commissions, DRBs, municipal planners and zoning directors, anybody who wants to be able to participate in this, because Vermont Local Roads training programs really are open it up to municipalities in a very broad way. And so keeping this fresh and keeping it relevant is like part of the objective here. Which sort of gets us to section 29.
Well, so let me comment on 28.
Go ahead.
So you are already doing this.
We're already doing that, yeah.
So what if we just said the agency shall continue to provide technical and planning assistance?
If it's the desire of the legislature to identify things we're already doing and put language in the bill about it, I would say we probably wouldn't have an objection to that.
Well, that's just an idea, and I'm very glad to hear that, and I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at some point, not today, obviously, but it'd be good for this committee to learn more
I
and
agree.
actually see the materials and know your schedule, and we can help promote it.
Sure.
But that's very good news.
It's excellent news.
Yeah.
And it's and I'll talk in a minute about how it ties into the update of the Vermont State Design Standards. But I think there are so many areas of effort, both sort of asked for and directed by the legislature and being driven by our federal directives that we do on a day-to-day basis that people just don't realize because of the breadth and width of it,
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't take time to notice what we did. And that was one of the things that the governance group I was on committee, where they said at the beginning of the year, we should look at what we asked for in the past few years and get an update. And so this would
Yeah.
be the kind of thing that you would update. And it's just helpful for us, not just to, make other legislation that would be conflicted, but just to help get the word out too, because the public needs to know about these things.
So we should have free time in the next couple of weeks after this one.
Yeah, we'd be.
After Friday and the deadline that the chair of appropriations gave to us.
And
But
everybody, you're not.
I'm just saying,
Seriously.
we're feeling your deadline and you've expressed that to us. That we should we should get people in here to talk about
We'd
what
love
we're
to bring
doing.
our subject matter experts in. And, as it relates to the Vermont State Standards, you've heard a lot about this effort over the years. It took us a long time to get to the point where we were going to be implementing it. Because we had to figure out how we were going to fund it. It's somewhere between a $750,000 and $1 million effort across multiple years to do this. And we are in the process of it. And it's a really comprehensive and fundamental change from having, you know, a template in a book that everybody is supposed to use for this kind of turn lane, to really thinking about context sensitivity and providing for flexibility in the process within guidelines. Okay, so we've messaged all of our stakeholders, and prior legislation has talked about who those stakeholders need to be. And so we have a very extensive list of folks involved in this. And throughout phase one of this project, we have stressed that this is going to be guidance rather than standards, and that the application of a one size fits all design, whether you're talking about a one size fits all sidewalk in a downtown or turn lane in a downtown or whatever, or a one size fits all B52 truck turn lane, which have been criticized as being very inflexible in the past, are now going to have the ability for provision of engineering judgment, and there will be online digital framework which allows a planning commission or a planner or a designer to go in and look at what would this type of application of a design look like under certain different types of circumstances, sort of ranging from a very rural circumstance to a downtown city of Burlington or Rutland or Middlebury, maybe not Middlebury, but along the spectrum is what I'm trying to say. So
Do we have the design? We have the current design. So
we do have a current
are
design.
you saying that
They'll be retired.
they'll be retired and we will create state design guides?
Yeah, it's going to be called something different. Vermont. And I think I'm so bad at remembering the name of this because it was changed a couple of times, but I believe it is the multimodal transportation design guideline.
I hope that's a good acronym.
Yeah, I don't think we have a good acronym. No, we don't. But at any rate, we spent a lot of time talking about the name. So in addition to context sensitive design, necessitating flexibility and adaptability to assess the modal hierarchy and adjacent land uses and respond to the needs of various roadway users, applying additional requirements and metrics of success to this evaluation will only further complicate responding to these reference points and move us backward in the conversation around the move from standards to guidelines where we are currently.
Would you need language to change that? Because doesn't the current language require standards?
I'll have to check with my staff on that. It may,
I
and
thought we directed you to replace the standard. And so if you say we didn't do the standards, we did guidance, seems like that might be a problem. I have to look.
I think
That's how
this is where the subject matter experts will come in handy too, because there are some set frameworks that we have to adhere to
Right.
as it relates to federal requirements we have. But I think we were
Standards could be guidance and still be called standards.
Yes, and so maybe the official thing will be Vermont state standards, so we don't have to change statute, but the common understanding will be that this is a
More broad, is that like
multimodal.
every sidewalk to be exactly this many inches wide.
Right. Yeah. So our subject matter experts will address that for you when they come in. That was my attempt to help folks understand in a minimal way where we are in the process, the overarching framework, and why we believe this very prescriptive language in the statute would contradict the direction that we understood users and designers and municipalities and regions all wanting to head in terms of having better flexibility and updating these to be less constrained than the 30-year-old design guidelines we have now.
So did we start, didn't we have language in 23?
Oh, yeah, we've had language for a number of years.
No, not the standards, but the language is to change the standards.
Yes, I think it probably was in 23. It's been in a number of T-bills recently. So we have been working on it for the past year. We had said it would probably be an 18 to 24 month process. So we're, I think, probably about, I don't know, for half to 2/3 of the way through.
Okay, that's good. So we kind of started it at the mid-year or the fall of 23. It's a 2-year project.
No, we didn't start it in the fall of 23. So, and that's where the program manager will have to explain sort of how we
Give us the time.
sort of what we did. And, there was a securing the funding from the Federal Highway
Right.
Administration because they didn't want to pay for this for a while.
Right.
And sort of, so, and then what was the contracting process, developing the RFP, that's very
Right.
complex and different framework than we've had.
Right. That we required specific stakeholders, like you said.
So we're happy to come and spend a chunk of time talking about it.
And then I have a question for Damien on this language. This is all new language. But it seems like I remember talking about some of these things before, but I guess I'd have to go look at the bill to see what was in there before. There wasn't anything in there that,
We pull up the bill while I'm here.
I didn't know if I guess I just have to look at the bill.
Yeah, I can pull it up.
What they were already required to do and how this changes what they were required to do and are doing.
Why don't we continue on to 29
Yeah.
and the design standards? I'd be interested to see where this would expand the standards, design standards to.
I think I covered and said all I have to say about 29 a moment ago. I think maybe I'm not making myself plain spoken today. So the effort we're undertaking to replace and update the Vermont State Design Standards, caveating the fact that the name is embedded in statute in some manner, is ongoing. It's comprehensive. It is addressing the types of things that are here, that the language here is prescriptive, which is the point of what we're trying to do, is get away from a prescriptive
Yep.
framework. So I think it would be helpful for folks to understand how the new framework will apply to the types of things that are addressed or requested in this language. Is that a question you're asking?
Yeah, well, somewhat, there's initiative here to have some focus on the reduction of miles traveled within particularly our downtowns and in that piece. And not having been in
Yeah.
this committee and having dealt with it, so not coming from the base that say Senator Kirchner is coming from, because I've been away from this for 6 years.
Yes.
The question for me is that overarching focus part of the effort in what's going on, and how do I relate what this would portray to what's going on?
Thank you for that question. I'll try to address it. It's going to be at a fairly high level. And then our subject matter experts will be in, but reducing vehicle miles traveled, whether you're trying to do it in a downtown or you're trying to get commuters to not drive their cars and take another mode, there are numerous programs and activities and planning processes and design processes that go into achieving that overarching policy objective. Okay, so we do measure vehicle miles traveled to see how we are doing, but we don't calculate it on like a project by project basis necessarily, because there are so many factors involved. You could, you could put a bus stop in a downtown area, but if there are no sidewalks going to that bus stop, then you may not achieve the objective of getting people out of their car. And so these design standards are being prepared to address what Act 181 is heading us towards from last year with the land use reform bill, which is to find more appropriate ways and more expeditious ways to have our compact developments, compact development patterns, and ways to support the development of housing and jobs in those areas of which the transportation system is an overlay. And to the extent that we are a part of making sure that the design standards for those land uses are going to be well coordinated within the community infrastructure, including recognizing your housing plans, your medical office locations, and all those things, in order to allow for people to not make that trip, to reduce vehicle miles traveled because they have other transportation options. And so this update of the Vermont State Design Standards is giving the flexibility to communities to develop in those land use patterns, which will achieve the outcomes that they are desiring about having, a compact settlement area with all of the services and needs of citizens and businesses in an area. That's just one example. So I think that the construct of applying vehicle miles traveled in this language and the construct of being highly directive as to how we achieve those objectives diminishes the work that we've been asked to do to create the flexibility for communities to use these tools, these design tools, these planning tools in a manner that achieves the overarching objective, part of which is reducing vehicle miles traveled. Does that help?
So just, there's so much to talk about in this, so I'm just trying to hold myself back, but so we are gonna have more of a conversation.
Yes, after we've passed the bill.
No, is that,
Yeah.
Well,
no, I think people are coming in tomorrow, but
we have ARP coming in.
so,
No.
so it sounds like the agency is doing these things again, but we just don't know about it. So that's kind of a systemic. That's not just the agency, but we have communication challenges in other parts of the state. So that's a different thing to talk about. But I do want to say that these design standards, they're really important. People have been talking about this for years. And a lot of our existing, most charming places, they would not be able to be built under the standards that we're trying to get away from. You know, the standards that have been in line for like the last 40 years.
There are conflicts between the two.
Yes, you couldn't build like a Brattleboro without newer standards and flexibility. And so we do have to have flexibility, and flexibility means giving examples, but not necessarily saying that it's only these things that you can do, because there are some things here that aren't listed, like bicycle things. And I mean, this is a very the language that we have here is a subset of what you're working on, I presume.
It is, but I wouldn't say that the way the language is structured captures the flexibility and the opportunities that will exist in the professionally developed framework that is being replicated from places around the country. So I guess I'm concerned that inserting language into our process at this point, which may or may not conflict with the effort that's been going on now for some period of time with a very extensively engaged stakeholder group that are the professionals that do this work. I have concerns that it would slow the work down further.
Because it's right, because it's just a part of what you're doing. But
It's a part that is not it's not exactly framed technically in the same way. And so I think that learning more about how what we are doing is addressing the types of things that are raised in this as concerns might help alleviate the concerns about whether or not we are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and those are serious concerns. I mean, this is a big deal. And so if we can be shown that you are doing this, I mean, send us stuff that we'll read tonight. But it's super important.
I'm happy to send information that describes the project and a link to the project website and all of the documents that have been shared with stakeholders and people that have been on the technical committees and involved in the process.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful.
We'll look for the information as quick as we can.
I'll work on that as soon as we break from this effort.
Okay. Next,
Yes. Okay. So, while, Michelle was talking, I did pull up the 2023 transportation bill. I did want to note that, well, the language in the last two transportation bills on the replacement of the Vermont state standards didn't, sort of, include, necessarily all the elements that are being considered in the design. It is worth noting, they were more sort of generally directed at the agency shall prepare a replacement, shall provide oral updates. And then last year we passed a section that said, release a draft by January 1, conduct not fewer than 4 public hearings, provide a publicly available responsiveness summary detailing public participation, et cetera. So it was really focused on the process. And then conducting focus groups, involving stakeholders, and then again, providing continued updates. In the 2023 bill, though, just before that.
You know what the act is for the 2023?
So 2023 is Act 62,
Okay.
and 2024 is Act 148.
Not in the 24 one.
Yeah. So an easy way to search for the T-bill every year is if you go to the Acts and Resolve search and just type transportation in the search box. That pulls 3 bills, 2 of which are the T-bills, and the other one was relating to transport of individuals in psychiatric care. So easy to eliminate the third option there and narrow in on the bills you're focused on. But in section 37 of the 2023 bill, just getting to the training on complete streets, we actually required the agency in consultation with the league and the regional planning commissions to develop that training that Michelle mentioned. So, and I do want to note that when I was working on Kurt's bill, I wasn't aware of that. And so I don't know the extent for the sponsors, but I know we didn't discuss it because I wasn't aware that that was there. So I just wanted to highlight that that is in there. And then get back to the draft that's in front of you for the DigSafe provisions, which are the last 2 sections of the bill. So yesterday at the close of our meeting, the chair mentioned that there had been a request to clean up. We had updated the timelines for DigSafe from 48 hours to 72 hours, but inadvertently left out sections 30 VSA 7006 and 7006A from the update. And so I worked with my colleague, Maria Royal yesterday, and we got this language put together. She had already prepared it. She covers utilities. So the language was ready to go. We dropped it in here. So you'll see this just updates all of the examples of 48 hours to 72 hours. And then it's 72 hours exclusive of Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays for the company to come out and do the dig safe marking. So that means that they won't get caught out with like a call at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Yes.
Okay, after the receipt of the notice, so who decides when the receipt happens? Do they have to actually have a person acknowledge the receipt?
So, yeah, so they get notified, and then once they've received the notice, let me pull
Right.
up 30 VSA 7005.
But if them receiving the notice means that someone has to see it and acknowledge it, that could be another day. So I'm just, 72 hours is, it's
So,
supposed to be a system that
From
happens
when you
quickly.
make the call.
Okay, so that's sending the notice, not receiving the notice. I just, I mean,
Depends on how you define receiving.
well,
so I can speak
depends
to
on
the
what your
statute here,
business.
if you'd like. I
Yeah,
can speak to the statute if you'd like.
Yeah.
Great. So, what it requires under 30 VSA 7004 is that you can't begin excavation activities except in an emergency without pre-marking. And so you have to notify the DigSafe system. And then the notice shall provide the description of the location. And then you notified the system either in writing or telephone by calling the toll-free number. And then upon receiving notice of the excavation activities, the system is required to notify all member companies whose facilities might be affected. And then they record the notice when they've gotten out the notice through the system. And if you want to know how they record when receipt occurs, I would encourage you to hear from the DigSafe system.
okay.
But they basically provide that notice, and then once that company is notified in accordance by the system, they have 72 hours, not counting holidays and the weekend, to do the marking. I can't tell you exactly when the system counts this notice as having been received,
Okay.
whether there is like a read receipt for when you get that email, or what they count. But if you have questions about that, I encourage you to hear from the system themselves.
And it's only telephone or writing.
Yeah, so the DigSafe system, it says written or telephone notice.
Does written include email?
So if we go to the DigSafe website for New England, there is a way to reach them by email or by phone. And they have a full FAQ there on how the process works. So you call 811 on the phone. And you can submit a DigSafe ticket right online. I can pull this up on the
No,
screen
that's,
for you.
I mean, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
I just
So-
also know that sometimes folks call them and it's not as quick as it should be.
Right.
But I agree, we should hear from the others and not spend time now.
Right. So I think the best source there is to hear from the system themselves, because the delays that may occur, you know, in the statute, it seems like everything occurs instantly, and the delays that may occur when a notice comes into the system between when it goes out, that I don't know what might cause those delays. And I'm not sure that it changes the intent here to focus on the internal delays so much as that this is just aligning it with what was a change made last year to move everything to 72 hours to ensure that, as I understand it, to ensure that folks could get out there in time to do the marking and be in compliance with the requirements.
And this was a request by the utilities?
I believe so.
Well, this is passed the Senate twice this year in budget adjustments.
Okay,
And if we don't do it here, it will be rolled into the budget. We don't have to do this here. The utilities did ask that, because this has to move along quicker,
Oh, right.
And they want to get in front of the construction season. And they thought that the T-bill might be quicker than the appropriations bill. They asked for that. We don't have to do it here. We can, leave it or, but that's the reasoning that was
Okay.
given.
Thank you.
So,
Interestingly, the Department of Public Service, who does underground utility, big state stuff, as part of the New England system, says that effective November 1st, 2024, the advance notice requirement in Vermont will expand from 48 hours to 72 hours.
Right, and so this change was supposed to occur as part of the bill that expanded that, and inadvertently 2 sections were omitted from the legislation, and that's what this is addressing.
So it's from like legislation that was passed.
Right, so
3.
yeah, if I go to the DigSafe statutes and you search for 48 hours, there are these 2 sections that just didn't get amended. Everything else has gone over to the 72-hour period.
Right.
This is more of a technical.
yeah,
It's a good thing.
So I believe that's how it's intended, is to just bring everything into line.
Yeah.
So it is not my area of expertise, but that's my understanding. We had, there was already language drafted. Like I said, that my colleague has had ready to go because this has been getting discussed and being dropped into other pieces of legislation. So we just simply took the same language, making the update and put it in here.
So it's like a Scrivener's error. Kind of, or. we don't have to do that.
Yeah, I think this was just, it was an error that occurred in the process, as often happens when we're amending things
Oh, yeah.
quickly, something got dropped
All
when
right.
we were doing the amendment.
So if it were a big issue, we would have heard about it. I presume that builders would be talking about it, and
I think
they're not.
what it
So
appears
I-
like the practice is 72 hours now.
Yeah.
So this makes everything confusing.
Yeah,
What's the pleasure?
I'm good
I'm,
putting it in.
Okay, we'll put this in.
no more questions from me
Okay.
on this.
Yeah, on the DigSafe, it also says 72 hours for Vermont on the DigSafe.
Okay.
People are already following.
And pretty much I've talked to a few contractors, they all think it's 72 hours.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. That's what I was worried.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need language to come into balance. You two touch base on that.
We have, it hasn't been added to the bill yet, but we talked about it. It's on my to-do list.
Okay.
So, we'll follow up later, and I think it might help for us to just touch base,
Okay,
with you, but I will add would you like that in the next draft?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
why don't we take 10 minutes and get back here in about 25 of, and we